So do you, just a general question to everyone, do you remember the first time you heard of Van Gogh, and what was your reaction to the paintings the first time you saw them? Can you just recall?
First of all, everyone would say Van Gogh initially.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know it was Van Gogh. And I think the first time I came across was when the song Starry Starry Night, I think in college,
Hmm.
everyone that had access to it. So when I really figured it out that this is what the song is talking about, and that's when I discovered the art.
Hmm. How about you, Ashwita? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, no, I
Okay.
don't actually have any input because I don't think I have observed any kind of art with. Well, I haven't been very keen into like, oh, how does this look different from this? It does, but no active thought has gone into like how and what and if it's a different style or if it is only particular colors. Never invested too much in that direction. It's only now that I observe so many things.
Hmm. But do you remember when you might have come across the paintings or person first,
Oh,
Mali?
in college, like that.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think I first, I think I read the book first because we didn't have much to do where I was in a village, so there were only the books at home. So I think I read the book and I read about his ear being cut off, and so all that made a bigger impact on me than the actual paintings. And I think the first time I saw it was the sunflowers. So there was a thought as to, what is this dead sunflowers? Why is one painting, droopy kind of dead sunflowers more than that was the first thought actually. But then yeah, now I grown to appreciate it so much, and I can fully understand the person and the kind of the passion, the kind of the the madness that the person had in him.
Hmm. So many of these artists have their lives have been documented extensively because of correspondence that they've sent out.
Yes.
So, in a sense, we're lucky that much is known. Um, I think my exposure the first time was again in college, and I remember a very good friend telling me that a very good friend of his gifted a book on Van Gogh paintings to his girlfriend. And we were just so happy. And we just thought, wow, what a lovely. I had no clue who the guy was, but I, it had never occurred to me that you could gift a book on a painter to somebody who's interested in art. Just that idea was interesting enough. My first exposure to Van Gogh paintings or Impressionism came in art history class when I was studying fashion design in Bombay. So I remember very distinctly, we were taught art history by Wendell Rodrigues, and he tried really hard to explain what Impressionism was. So the range of students that we had was people who had gotten out of just 12th standard and some people who were pursuing this diploma after graduation. So obviously the older girls knew better. The younger girls, we would just so he tried to tell us things like the artist applied paint one stroke at a time. And I remember thinking, how is that different from any other painting? Won't you apply one stroke at a time? So you saw blank looks, obviously. Then no, no, no. So let me elaborate. It's not just one stroke at a time, one color and one stroke at a time. And then it started making sense that, okay, in other places you would blend colors, make different shades, and then you would apply the shades, but not ever having painted as much myself, definitely not in oil. I was still very confused for the longest time. I think then, so this was maybe in 92 or 93. And then in 96, I happened to go to Amsterdam and see the museum. So that at that time, I remember being absolutely blown away, but I didn't know why I was blown away. And to some extent, I was still clueless about what Impressionism was. So since then, so from 96 till maybe 2001, 2002. In 2001, 2002 April, there was a Picasso exhibit in Pompeii, for which I had gone 4 months pregnant. And my mom had said, no, 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 you don't have to do all this in pregnancy, first pregnancy and all. She was being like this mother hen around me. But I said, how many times am I going to see Picasso? Yeah, please let me go and see this. So I begged and pled, and then she said, okay, fine, just go. So not that Picasso is an impressionist, but it makes a difference. You start reading about one genre of art, and sooner or later you start seeing that there are either influences or connections to other genres, other schools of thought, and that connection makes that one aspect of art also a lot clearer. So after that, then I did a lot more reading. And of course, it's easy to first purchase a book. So I went and bought whatever books I could on fine. So that helped. And I'm not an avid reader. As much as I would like to imagine, I would have loved to read a book cover to cover and all, but that does not happen. Because the moment I start reading biographies, I start making notes. It's a very laborious task when I have to read a simple book. I cannot retain information. So then I start making notes. And then in the notes, it takes such a long time because then I have to compose, I have to make lettering so perfect and all that. It never happens. So eventually I land up just going through the book very rapidly, reading pertinent information at the time that I need it. And so my depth of knowledge in terms of subjects is iceberg level. It's only what you see on top. It impresses. There is no depth. I've never had the time to do a deep study on anything. So it's like a sea of icebergs only. There's nothing beyond that. What you see is only the top. But that helps at least to identify topics and see that there are more things happening over here, and not to take, firstly, not to just dismiss anything. You do a little study and you know that, okay, this so-and-so thing exists, and at a later point, you can always go and study parts of it in depth and start building up a whole bank of information. So today I want to just expose all of you to Impressionism in general and my impression of how Impressionism has changed visual arts for all of us in the contemporary world. Now, to give you an idea of what we are going to do, I've shared a bunch of paintings. Some of them are whole paintings of Van Gogh. Some of them are details of some of those paintings. It is important to see the detail as much as appreciate the full painting. Excuse me. So the reason for that is because in Impressionism, there is what you see at a closer range is very different from what you see from further away. The manner in which they have approached painting was radically different from the painters from before. There was such a turmoil that took place because of this radical shift from existing accepted rules of painting, that it paved a path for modern art in a sense that might not have happened otherwise. It always takes some brave souls to stand their ground and say, you know what, enough of what you've done right now. We want to do something different at whatever cost to us personally. And through that, a lot of things have, I think, become accessible, possible, and even available to us to imagine beyond the existing realm of art. So I'm going to elaborate on all of this as we go ahead. The process of today's painting is going to be more DIY. So I am going to give you a primer about how to go about it. And the whole idea behind this exploration is for you to experience it for yourself and not for me to spoon feed you that experience. Now, this is a little bit in line with what is expected of viewers or experiencers of modern art. And again, I'll elaborate this a little further as we go along. I'll share the images and speak a little bit about those. So this one is one of the most famous paintings. Everyone knows it. Now you find it in every place possible. The radical departure from traditional painting is the fact that the colors are not blended. You can distinguish strokes. In earlier times, say 20 years before Van Gogh's style of painting, being able to see a brushstroke was considered poor quality, could be considered poor quality. When you painted, you spent a lot of time on blending and mixing and creating lifelike paintings, or to a large extent, a likeness of life, like even if your brushstrokes were visible. In this case, nothing is lifelike. It is very graphic. So you see the moon, but you see it like a graphic. This is not how we see the moon in real life. You see maybe clouds, swirling lights. All of it is in a very graphic style. So the difference between a regular painting, a classic painting, and a graphic painting is now apparent to us because we are surrounded by so many graphics. Lines are more simplistic, details are reduced, and you are only given an idea of what is to be communicated. That the communication is more important than the look. Now, if we look at something like this, this is a detail of a painting. He painted a lot of irises. Here too, you can see the brush strokes and you can see almost individual colors. If we look a little closer, some colors look like they are not blended on the canvas. A shade has been created and then that has been applied on the leaves with a very thick, dark outline, which again makes it look very graphic. Same with the flowers. Again, the same style throughout. Here's a detail of the flower also. If we look even closer, you might not even be able to tell that it is a flower. It just looks like blue globs of paint. You can very clearly see the vertical and horizontal strokes and individual colors. They're not blended. So in a sense, these look like lazy strokes. And I feel that some artists who might have gone to see this must have thought, just hand me that damn brush. I'll show you how it's done. It seems that juvenile. Same thing here. So this seems to be like a, oh, just excuse me 1 second. Just give me a minute, I'll be right back. Sorry. Okay. So I should have left you with a detail to observe. All right. So as I was saying, we have a lot of individual colored strokes. Now, another thing I'd like you to notice is the variety of colors. So Impressionism coincided, obviously it was not a coincidence, but coincided with the advent or the introduction of commercial colors. Earlier, oil paints were used to be made by the artist or their artist's assistants. So it was very difficult. Being a painter was a lot of hard work. You couldn't go to a store or a supplier and get paints. So the variety of commercially produced paints allowed the artist to really explore. And I think, like little children, they just I should say, instead of kids in a candy store, you should say artists in an art store. They just went berserk. So, along with florals, which also become part of landscape and landscapes, we also have portraiture. And here is some very fascinating use of color. Using colors like green for the eyebrows, red for the eyes. Can't fault him for using orange for his beard because he was a redhead poor chap. So within that also creating depth with contrasting colors rather than using black. Creating the impression of black using all colors except black. That was the radical departure. So one difference between Vincent and the other Impressionists is that Vincent did land up using a little bit of black, like over here, a little for the outlines, sometimes even for certain shadows. You might see that in the trees. And so theoretically, he is not an Impressionist, he is a post-Impressionist. Oh, I'm still invisible. Now, let me explain some terminology to you. This is, you should read up on all of this because the terms that they have given to artists or art movements are, I think, very Latin based. So, post Impressionist to our mind thinks You have Impressionists, and then after the Impressionists, you get the Post-Impressionists, right? But it's not how that definition works. Post-Impressionist would be people who are within the Impressionist world, but they do something a little adjacent or a little extra. So taking Impressionism and then adding something more to increase the boundaries of Impressionism would be considered Post-Impressionism. So it's not after Impressionism. I've often been confused, and then I read up about this a little bit. So that's how Van Gogh was. He was contemporary to all the other artists like Monet, Manet, Degas. One of his good friends was Paul Gauguin, who was part Impressionist, but he did some other work as well. So these guys were all, in a sense, churning this whole thing together. Vincent, I think, wanted to, because of his madness, kind of isolated himself, but still had this desire to paint, and he wanted to establish himself and his own style in a certain manner. But he was terrible at marketing. So while on the other hand, Monet was a great marketer. He marketed himself really well and became very wealthy with his painting. So poor Vincent lost out over there. Now, when we think about Vincent's painting, apart from the fact that there are certain strokes that he made or a certain style that he used, there's also a reason for that. He wanted to work close to the subject and make an authentic representation of the subject that he saw, which meant that he limited himself by only painting what he saw at the time that he saw it, as opposed to creating a subject, taking it back into your studio, and then making the painting in the studio. The moment you go away from the subject, you create a fracture between reality and your painting. And your painting could well be, in today's parlance, it could probably be like a photo retouched image. The artist's imagination might sometimes override reality. So he wanted to be in the field and paint the wind, for example. He wanted to show movement, he wanted to show joy or sadness or whatever he felt in that environment and translate that into his painting. So if we think about it, how do you paint wind? How would you paint a feeling? That is what makes these paintings more evocative. If ever you see a Van Gogh painting, I would recommend just stand in front of the painting for a good 5 to 10 minutes. Standing in one place for 5 minutes is a very long time. It always seems like 15 minutes at least. But the more time you spend just with your eyes on the painting, you will actually start seeing the painting move, because he has painted with really thick blobs of paint, and the thickness of the blobs makes the painting look three-dimensional. Because of the three-dimensional quality of the strokes and the paints, you have certain light and shadow that creates the illusion of movement. And plus, the strokes are made in consecutive strokes, consecutive lines, one close to the other, so that still creates the illusion of movement. So all these things are there. As we start painting, I will tell you a little bit more about it. But I like to keep working and then listening to information. Otherwise, we're just wasting time. So I'm going to give you the freedom to choose whichever painting you want to make. And not what I'm going to demonstrate necessarily. You can make that also if that is your choice. The reason for that is that I want you to experience the strokes, the colors, the composition individually for yourselves. The eventual result might be the same, but that is going to be very broad, that you will be stepping into the shoes of somebody else. You are relinquishing control of choice of color, um, composition, elements that you have to make, how you're going to make them. And in that way, you are almost, I guess, shackling yourself to just doing this task. The advantage of doing that is you might probably do stuff that you would never have thought before. You would choose colors that you would never touch before. You would make shapes in a certain way that you would never think possible. And once you have gone through that experience physically, not just studying it visually, you are able to expand your own repertoire. You will suddenly look at maybe a hibiscus and say things, maybe you don't have to paint it red. You can create the illusion of red by painting it with some other colors. You don't have to paint the petals absolutely perfect. You might be able to make them more geometric and still get the result. So the idea of impression is creating likeness to something in the style that you think is very pleasant to see. They're two separate things altogether. So I'm going to take this detail, the detail of the irises, and I want to show how this can be created. The rules will be pretty much the same for all other paintings as well. As usual, we will make certain lines, give ourselves an internal grid. With anything like this, which are just amorphous shapes, making some grid always helps. We can make a vertical, horizontal half grid. You can make it into even more parts if you want. We can also divide it in 3 parts. So since this is not a complete painting, you will not see the usual rules of composition. You won't see the rule of 1/3. You might not see a horizon line. You might not be able to see a lot of those things. But that's okay. This grid only helps you to build a shape according to how is seen in this painting. It's very limited in scope. So I'm sharing this picture on the group. That way you can observe that, and you can also observe how I'm using.
Anji, how big do we make this?
I'll tell you all of that. Now, though this is a detail, we don't make it too big. We stick to our requirement and our need. So don't make the painting larger than about postcard size. So that's about 4 by 6 or thereabouts. And again, do not measure it with the scale. I happen to have a postcard size paper ready, so I'm giving you an idea. But just paint the picture about so much. I would like you to just observe the first few minutes and then you can paint. I'm going to measure the painting. It's about 2 by 3. So my way of measuring 2 by 3 is to first draw a line, divide it in half, so I get a unit, and then use that unit to make 3 of the same unit. Now, if you have paper tape, this is a nice place to use paper tape. Now, there's a brand by this name. Their paper tape is very good. There's another one, which is a Chinese brand, which is only Chinese text on it. That is also, I think it's the same one. And you get different thicknesses. If you've got washi tape, you can use that also. But don't use masking tape that is used for furniture or for painting, because that will pull out a fiber. That's pretty useless. So I will mark my edges this. Now this tape is reusable. So once your painting is done, if you don't wet the tape too much, you can remove this and paste it in the back of your book and keep using it again. Once this is done, I will mark my lines, vertical center, horizontal 1/3, 2/3, and very lightly and with just dotted lines. So I get a more or less idea of where things are going to be. And then I will start drawing the shapes. Now, start drawing from somewhere in the center, because if you have not measured it accurately and if some part has to go, it can go outside the painting. If you start from one side, even that is fine, then complete it to one side and you might need to adjust the tape from any one side. I am only making broad outlines. You can pretty much tell that detail is not really required. And if possible, try to avoid using an eraser. So if that is your goal, then you will make the lines more carefully also. If you keep an eraser next to you, I can guarantee you, you will unnecessarily make wrong lines, and then you'll keep erasing and destroying the quality of the paper surface. In this painting, the lines are fairly large and these straight. Many of them are very just straight lines. I have never drawn flowers like this before. I mean, before this exercise. I've done this very exercise several times before. But the one thing that I notice is how even with drawing straight lines, you are able to achieve a softness and detail in something like florals. Do not draw too many lines. If you feel comfortable with making just dotted lines, that's fine. When you go to make landscapes, you might not have so many details. So in that case, suppose, now in this case, I have a leaf here. I can just make a dotted line to indicate where the leaf is. You might be able to make a horizon line with just that, because everything else is the same and it's a very light color.
I'm sorry, I'm either forgetting or I missed this horizon line.
You're forgetting what?
The horizon line concept. What is the horizon?
Okay, I'll explain to you. Once we come to the landscapes, I'll just show you. Now here, my flower is becoming really long, so I can adjust my tape a little bit. At any point, if you feel that you need extra space for your picture, do expand the boundaries. Don't try to fit the design within the space that you have pretty much arbitrarily assigned. So over here also I can see that I can expand it just a little bit to give me better space for this petal here. Some details might not be clear, so don't make them at this stage. You can make them later. The original painting has been painted in oil. We are painting in watercolor. So we have to change our technique a little bit to still make it look as intense and full of depth as oil. So we can start off with making a few washes. Make a base color wash and then make the strokes on top of that. So let me demonstrate that part to you. I'm using a slightly fattish brush and matching colors. I have a ready green here, which is mostly, I think, emerald green and lemon yellow. I'm deliberately not going to tell you all these colors because I want you to play with it. So I'm making a loose application of color. In this part, in fact, do not be too careful with your application. All the stuff that I tell you not to do, please really do it in this painting. So go over strokes again and again. Make your painting a little textured. Even if the painting dries, you can go over it. So these things normally we want to avoid because we are trying to make very fine paintings. But if you want to, you can also try mixing the color on the painting itself. Make the strokes visible. Here I'm changing the color and making it a little more emerald. And don't pay too much attention to consistency. You could have it wet, you could have it dry. Literally, don't do anything that I normally tell you to do. Do everything instinctively. Okay, now while this layer is drying, I will tell you about the horizon line. Now, you don't really have to bother about a horizon line in a painting that we're trying to copy. A horizon line is where you can see the horizon. In this case, we have the horizon line over here. Because of the division between land and earth, land and sky, or earth and sky, the horizon line becomes an important dividing line in any landscape painting. The colors will change dramatically from the ground up to the horizon line, and then the interaction at the horizon line, and then the sky. Because these colors change, that line becomes very important. So with this line, you need to just identify the point where the land meets the earth. And that would be somewhere here. Because on this line or up to this line, you have the foreground where you have the field, you have these bushes, And then beyond that, we have this tall stuff that stands on the ground and then rises up. So you have trees that rise up and you have mountains that rise up. Now the horizon line is always at your eye line. So if you look out your window, depending upon what floor you live on or where you're sitting, your horizon line will show you that far. I'm on the 8th floor right now, so I can see buildings to the other side of town. If I go all the way down to the ground, my horizon line comes to where I can see just the end of the street. So, depending upon the view you want to create, the horizon line remains over there, but you can change the view that you want to make so that either you can show the horizon line lower and more of the sky, or you can show horizon line higher, more of the area around you, the ground around you, and then small part of the sky. So at some point we will do landscape painting and I will explain to you this in detail. But for today, you just need to make this line similar to what we've done before. You will divide the painting in half because that's easier. In this, you will see that you could probably divide it further into quarters and you will get some kind of horizon line over here. Now, I don't want you to get too concerned about the technicality. Just let that go. Make the outlines like I've made, and then you can start painting. Okay, so since my colors are yet to dry, why don't you guys try to make one frame? Choose whichever one you like. Make a frame, draw the features by just color separation, and mix paint and apply a base coat. And then we will all put in the strokes together. That way we'll save some time and you guys can start painting fast.
So I'll use my watercolor paper. That's fine.
Yeah, I think so. It should be fine.
Okay.
When you're painting, try to make your strokes as just single independent strokes instead of blending. Avoid blending. So maybe you can observe how I'm doing this. I've made this one stroke. I'll make the next stroke next to it. As opposed to, this kind of fine painting. These paintings can be recreated very well in crayons or pastels, and even color pencils for that matter. Those of you who have little children around, you should try making this painting with kids. I've made this with a bunch of 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, or 4 to 6, 9 to 12, and even up to 15, 16-year-olds. And it's absolutely delightful at all ages. With the very young kids, they feel suddenly very capable and great artists, especially when you tell them that paintings like these have sold for millions. Though they may not understand what millions is, how much it is, they know that it's a lot. Or millions, billions, gazillions. So I was able to use this as an icebreaker in a sense for the younger kids. Those who felt that they did not like art at 4 to 6, I don't think they don't really understand what liking and not liking is. They either do it or they don't do it. And that's probably because they're not patient enough. That's about it. So my since this is such a open topic, my instruction to them used to be, if you can finish this painting in 10 minutes, then the rest of the time you can go play. And they'd say, okay, fine, that works for me. And they would then fatafat do this. And it works well because I get them to do the work the way the artist did that work. And that's very important as an experience. Then there are times when there are the over diligent kids, but not at the age of 4 and 6, or a little older, who start doubting themselves. Is this the right color? Am I making the right shape? Is it in the right place? Is it looking horrible? And everything half done looks horrible. So then the second guessing takes such a long time for them to finish their painting. So for them, I have to use a different tactic. Again, I have to tell them, do this painting like it should not be done. So imagine you're telling somebody what not to do in a painting, and I want you to do it that way. So for every category of learner, there is a different way to approach the topic. And sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. And sometimes there is a kid who will say, what if I want to paint these flowers red? So then you can't say no. You have to just say, okay, why don't you do it? You can change the colors to whatever you want, but you have to paint it like this with strokes. So give a little, take a little, I suppose. Now, while you're painting, I'll give you a little bit of my impressions of Impressionism and how it has radically changed our life. I'm going to try and draw a straight through line from Impressionism right up to emojis that we use today. Now, at the time that Impressionism became popular, I think one of the contributing factors to this idea in artists' minds was the invention of photography. So while in the past, if you needed a portrait to be made, you had to have a lot of money. So only a few people were able to create portraits for themselves. In fact, that is the origin of the phrase, it cost me an arm and a leg comes from. Because paintings, portraits were made or charged according to how many features of the human you wanted to make. If it was just the face, you got a certain rate. And then you wanted a bust that came up to the torso, so it included 2 arms. So then you had to pay for the arms. And then if you wanted the whole figure, then you have to pay an arm and a leg. Now, when photography came, you could get it done faster, and you could go and stand in front of a camera at that time also for an extended time, but it became accessible to a lot of people who otherwise would not have access to having a likeness of themselves available to them. There must have been some kind of insecurity building in artists, painters at that time, about their future. As is always the case, I think, with every new technology. Nowadays, artists are concerned about their craft with respect to AI. So technology has always challenged the classical crafts, because that is the one place where they become redundant. But then if you think about it, they could have been redundant in the clear goal of the craft, which was to create a likeness of a person. That was achieved. But if you expand that a little bit, there are different aspects to it. It's not just making the likeness of a face, it's how accurately you need to make it. At that time, of course, it wasn't even in color. So color became important. The fact that in a painting you could use color. But then some of the artists took it even further, not just portraiture, but even landscapes, even still life. what can we do that the camera can't do? One part is imagining it as it can be imagined by us, and then executing it as only I can do it. And the colors I choose will be mine. That choice will be different from somebody else. So they started consolidating a more unique identity for themselves and found that that was possible only if they switched and shifted from existing norms that were accepted by the art elite. That's why when these Impressionists started making their paintings and they exhibited in, I think it was in 1885 or something like that, they were ceremoniously thrown out of the salon because all the paintings looked juvenile, they looked ugly to the eye at that time, and many of them also looked unfinished. The term Impressionism comes from Monet's painting called Impression Sunrise. And he just wrote the title as Impression Sunrise because he couldn't think of anything else. It was a sunrise, but he can't say it is a sunrise. It almost looked like a preliminary painting of what he would then develop over months. But he just sent it anyway. So I think 2-3 times they sent the paintings and Salon said nothing doing. Finish it and bring it back and then we'll see. So then these artists almost in a huff said, "Acha, hum bhi dekh lenge." And then they hired a place right opposite the salon. And when the salon had their exhibition, these guys had their own exhibition. And they were criticized heavily even by the public because it just didn't make sense to them. Why are we looking at paintings that a toddler could paint? So it all comes down to a mindset, a kind of psychic continuity that exists in all of us. We get used to a certain quality, used to a certain accepted standard of every craft or every art form, whether even if it's to do with film, for example. And then when somebody wants to do something radically different, it takes us a while to see the good in it, I would say. So eventually they just pushed on and they started almost like a parallel movement. So while most people were happy with the classical arts and they would go to the museum, a gallery and look at the paintings and marvel at the skill of the artist to show exactly what they saw, exactly the likeness of a face or a landscape exactly the way it is. And then you go opposite side of the road and you see these paintings, and then you go close to it and you see one thing. You go far away, you see another thing. And you could see the same thing in different lights, but in different colors, in different manner. And you could tell which is which color. And to be able to do that without blending colors, it was for the over time, people realize that there is something to it. It requires a certain amount of participation from the viewer. So it was about seeing a painting and not just marveling at the skill as much as how you responded to it. In classical art, you would look at paintings and be awed by just the depiction of a particular scene. If it was either historic or mythological, it was the impact or importance of that event that you marveled at. But when you saw Impressionism, they did not have to go into history, they did not have to go into mythology. They painted that which was real, that which was around them, and made the mundane special. Van Gogh had a lot of paintings of regular people like potato eaters, farmers, peasants, hay cutters, all sorts of people who would want to see their paintings. Lots of people said, give me the painting of like a Madonna, or give me the painting of a king. Why would I put the painting of two dumb old shoes on my wall? So they did have a point there. But the fact that he could take something as regular and glorified became his voice. So adjacent to this time, just a little before this, was something, a movement also called realism. And if you have some time, you should just read up a little bit on it. Realism was a movement during which time it's often confused as people drawing objects in hyper realism, making them look very real. That's not what realism is. Realism as a movement in art meant drawing from reality. So rejecting mythology, rejecting glorification, draw what is real, draw real people, draw people sitting in pubs or people sitting in cafes, whatever real subject that you find around you, that is what you have to draw. Capture life around you. So, like I said, when you start reading up about one movement, there are other things that you are exposed to, and then you just can burrow through that rabbit hole into several channels and get more and more information. So you realize how that movement gave a little bit of fuel to Impressionism also. Then, as we move further, like I said, I want to draw a through line from there to emojis. Impressionism allowed people to involve the viewer to express their impact to the painting. So slowly this started creeping into other subjects where treatment of the painting became very became more the fun part than the subject that they were painting. So instead of making a painting of Napoleon or Apollo or these Greek gods, it didn't matter that Picasso made a painting of all of his wives, ex-wives, lovers, everybody, but the manner in which he made it made each painting unique. Sometimes they were people who were even unnamed, like in paintings by Monet, there's another Cézanne, and it didn't matter that they were not prominent people as long as the treatment was something that evoked an emotion. Sometimes, then this moved into things like minimalism, which is part of modern art. So, modern art also is like a huge topic that everyone should learn. So, modern art is often seen as very dismissively by most people, and I don't blame them. I have been one of those people till I went to a modern art gallery and spent some time there. The running joke is if you don't understand the art, it's modern art. And if we limit it to just that definition, then definitely we will not understand it or appreciate it. Modern art is art that is mostly abstract, and the abstraction allows for interpretation. So the difference in between classic arts and modern art would be that in classic arts, the topic is completely explained to you. So it's like reading a whole novel. And everything is described in detail. You can enjoy the beauty of the words, the descriptions, and spend time in the company of that beauty. With modern art is more like a haiku. It's abstract. You can interpret it many ways. You might have just one interpretation of it. The poet or the writer may have one intent behind writing the haiku, but depending upon your place in life, you might interpret it very differently. And every time you come across that haiku, you will see something different in it. So that's how I draw comparison. You might find something similar also. The point is that classical arts were made for a different purpose at a different time under different circumstances. Modern art allowed for more things to be experienced, and experiencing that was more important. So when you go to a gallery which has classic paintings, like you go to a Rijksmuseum, you go to the Louvre, Versailles, any of these old museums, you come back definitely awed and overwhelmed. When you go to a modern art museum, you can never come out inert. That is the worst insult for a modern art museum. You may not be awed, you may not be overwhelmed, you may not be impressed, but you have to feel something. And if that something is even disgust, then the modern artist has achieved his or her goal. So, this requirement of art to stir up emotion in the viewer is a new idea. It was not the intention of art in the beginning. So, the purpose has changed now, and the intent of the artist has changed. The moment we understand that, we can start seeing art very differently. So, because the Impressionists decided to shun all previous rules, they opened a door for new possibilities. The moment you say, I don't care about finesse, I want feeling, I want emotion, then you've got this whole range of emotions that you can play with. And then skill and technique just starts becoming something that allows for communication. In a sense, it is, I guess, comparative to beautiful calligraphic writing and then coming down to chicken scratch, because communication becomes more important and not how beautifully you've written and how elaborately you have made the strokes. Okay, so this is part one. How are you guys doing? Are you able to recreate your paintings? Because I was waiting for my color to dry. Have you moved on to making individual strokes? Great. Okay. That's good.
Something's happening.
Very good. Okay. So like I said, this this has been done even by 6-year-olds. So you really don't need too much instruction.
It's something, yeah, making the individual strokes is kind of taking the different colors and doing the individual strokes is every time washing the brush, then taking different color.
Yeah.
Yeah, something is coming.
It will come with whatever you do. This painting is very easily achieved. I don't really have to do too much. That's why this is a nice DIY class. Okay, so now part two of the explanation. There are some artists in the whole group of Impressionists who also worked with another abstraction of the line or the stroke. So there's an artist called Pissarro, Emile Pissarro, I think, who worked with just dots, and his style of painting is called pointillism. So he spent many months in creating a huge painting that's maybe about 6 feet by 8 feet or something. That's a huge size painting of people. It's called The Scene at the Beach, I think, or La Plage. So is it La Plage or let me remember it. I'm going to show you a picture of that. So this is a scene where people are, it's called the promenade. Yeah, correct. It's a promenade. So there are lots of people. They're walking about. This was, I guess, a popular pastime before TV. And the whole painting is painted with just dots. So he is made, when you go closer to the picture, you will only see dots. You don't see a painting at all. And the further you back away from the painting, you start seeing those dots coalesce into shapes. And as you go further and further, that shape starts making sense. You start seeing contrast, you start seeing color more distinctly. So he's been able to create this painting with a lot of depth and lots of contrast without using even, I guess, black. He's probably used more primary colors also. So let me look for that painting, and then I will speak about it. I hope it's Pissarro. I could be wrong. Oh, this is a George Seurat painting. I'm very sorry. Yeah? I gave you the wrong name. A Sunday on La Grangette. What is this at the Art Institute? Okay, I'm just going to share the screen now and show it to you for a moment. Yeah, so this whole painting has been made with just dots. And if you go very close to the painting, you will notice very few line details. He's made whatever he can make with dots. Now these black dog and umbrella that we see over here, I won't be too surprised if he's achieved this black without using black, by just making a whole series of contrasting colors, one on top of the other. I don't know how long he took this painting to be made, but maybe I can look for it. So this is George Seurat, by the way. It's not Emile Pissarro. Emile Pissarro is another impressionist, and his paintings are very different. Now, if you think about it, this pointillism is nothing else but pixelation. Now, we are so comfortable with pixels. We have seen computer screens with pixels. We sometimes find low resolution images which have pixels. And we have, I guess, grown up on a technology like television, which earlier at least relied on these tiny colored crystals, RGB crystals, which would light up at different intensities to create a range of millions of colors. But it all draws from 150 years ago. And even today, just because I guess the science of sight works that way, we put in a certain number of colors in a certain manner, we will see that particular color. So now, Impressionism also got us into things like sciences. 3-color printing or 4-color printing, by the way, is a technology where you take dots of different sizes and you print them one on top of the other at different angles and create millions of colors. So any printed material you see around you, which was mass produced, was most likely printed with this, what's called 4-color process printing. Digital printing also to some extent uses the same technology. So all of this comes from Impressionism. So I often find that they are not given enough credit for how much they landed up doing for even modern visual arts. Now, coming down to that emoji idea, an emoji is something that we have, which we can say is the idea of Impressionists of creating an emotional response to an abstraction which has gone through modern art, come into graphic art, graphic design, and through there we have assigned values to color, to shape, to form, and when we see it, we respond with some kind of emotion. So it's a long thread, but the idea behind is still the same. So today, when somebody sends you an emoji, you can still respond to it because of the idea that an assigned color means something. It's almost as good as language of visual arts in itself. So I often draw this parallel between calligraphy, the evolution of calligraphy also, but now at least I feel that lettering arts are devolving because there was a time when everyone spent so much time in writing so beautifully. But now I suspect that many people write only as good as cavemen did. So somewhere we have lost the skill or even the value of beautiful writing. Hopefully we can bring that back.
This is very tricky. Don't know when to stop. I don't know when you're overdoing it or not.
That is actually a problem with many paintings, huh? But my recommendation would be to, I think our 90-minute class is a good time frame. Whatever you come to at the end of maybe an hour, maximum 90 minutes, stop and take a break, go for a walk and come back. And after that, if you feel a compelling need to do it, to make that line a stroke or color, without which you won't be able to eat or sleep or hug your loved ones, then by all means, go ahead and do it. But this is something that we were taught in fashion school also. And this is generally taught to people who want to be well styled. When you don't know when to stop putting on all of your accessories, remove the last one. Because by the time you start doubting yourself, you've already overdone that accessorizing. So maybe you can go by the same rule. I would say refrain from adding any dark color. The dark colors that you add, unless, I mean, you will have added some dark colors, but when you come to a point where you don't know whether or not you need to go ahead or whether you need to stop, don't do anything in dark shades. The lighter shades you can still continue and you can still create more depth. Dark shades can ruin everything in one stroke. So avoid that. So this study of other painters' work was done very often by all the artists in the past also. This does not count as plagiarism, by the way. A lot of times people confuse plagiarism with studies. A study is something that allows you to experience the rules in art or the choices made in art from another artist's perspective. Plagiarism would be if you were to take this painting and sell it as your own. That is plagiarism. Even Vincent himself painted a lot of other artists' work. There is this very famous painting of cherry blossom that he painted after some Japanese prints, I think. Then who are the other artists who did their impression? So when you go to a gallery, or even if you're searching some images, you will find the title of a painting being Cherry Blossom After. So after, again, like I explained to you, post-impressionist. After means not just after in time, but being inspired by the painting of or the poster or something like that from somewhere else. So they often put that in the title itself. That way, that painting gets legitimacy. Sometimes if the artist has interpreted in their own style, then that, I guess, switches out of the copyright. If you painted the same thing, obviously that is a copy. Wow, very nice. Wonderful.
Show. I missed.
So I will pin this.
Oh, how lovely. Wow. I was not actually sure what to do, so I've done nonsense.
Why? You should just do it. This is one of the most liberating topics. Oh, nice. See? Very nice. So I don't know, Sharda, are you comfortable with making visible strokes in paintings?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm happy that I went a little dark. I normally don't use dark colors. I tend to muted.
Now in this, for the lighter shades, you can use crayons, pastels, sometimes even color pencils. You might get glass pencil or an opaque pencil to make some distinct strokes. Please do that if you have it. That again creates a lot of drama because of the contrast in colors.
Okay.
Because we've done and seen a lot of very different looking stuff, these look like broken strokes, and it feels like this painting obviously looks beautiful, the original one, but this feels like there's a tuta futa feeling is there because of those strokes and because they're so prominently just broken, or like there is, it's not one continuous anything. There is minuscule effort to blend in terms of using different shades of blue, for example. If there's that wave thingy and you want to make some in dark blue and some in light blue and some strokes of white in between. It's very pretty, but not pretty at the same time. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Very interesting. You should write a note on this. So in the back, you should write as an experience what you, your impression of your impressionist study. Because again, here's another thing I feel we don't do enough of is journaling our thoughts. So we don't all have to agree that something is pretty. We don't have to agree that something is ugly, or some colors work, some colors don't work. Having an individual response to something is paramount. And I almost sometimes feel this is the new revolution that we have to start in the country, because we are a culture that says, don't think, listen to your elders or listen to somebody else, follow orders. And if you're doing something, if you're doing anything that you have thought up, you are definitely going to fail. So I maintain that that is one reason why we have such few innovators and such few um, patents when it comes to innovation, because there's no confidence. We do lots of jugaad. So taking somebody else's idea and twisting it around and making a DIY out of it, we can do that great. But the
Yeah,
idea of having
because
go
you know, I
on.
remember if when we were very little, if somebody could sing like Mohammad Rafi, they were very good. But if they sang in their own style, it was like, oh, so Besura, or what is this nonsense? So every time we had to be like someone else, only then it was appreciated. If we were doing something original, it was usually criticized and called stupid. I think that has happened to me so much that I
Yeah.
never had confidence to talk also. I think.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And you're not alone. I think all of us have gone through that. So even when I have a class for kids, I have to keep telling them that in school, maybe you are required to be the best of the lot. But in here, you have to be your best, which can be different from the lot completely. The more different everybody is, the better the class is. And they find it very difficult to reconcile the two ideas. So you can use this exercise to note down your thoughts about the exercise. So you can go into certain depths of maybe writing down a little information about the artist that you know without doing any Wikipedia search. Because your starting point should be a genuine starting point. And again, I feel that we feel too embarrassed about not knowing enough. We cannot know everything. And it's okay to know something, very little of something, have the wrong information. It's perfectly okay. We are embarrassed before even speaking or exposing our level of information. So don't do that. Write down what you know, write down what you think you know, then do a search. Do not, under any circumstance, write down the exact sentences written in any search engine, because that is using your brain a little less. We don't want to do that. So take that information, make some notes or points, and write it in your own words. As I read on Wikipedia, this is what I find, because then that way it still remains your voice. And then try to do a little bit of a critique. What do you think about the style yourself? And do not write it as an apology. Don't say, while the world thinks that he's a great artist, I don't really agree. Don't make it apologetic. You can just come right out and say, I do not think Impressionism makes a great impact on me. And maybe I'm puzzled why people find it so attractive. To me, it looks haphazard. The colors look unfinished. The paintings don't have strong topics. So justify your position, why you're not impressed by it, and without apologizing for it. That again takes a lot of confidence. Once you have that, you should also have the humility. Next year, if you change your opinion, you should have the humility to say, I see it differently today. You will have record of how you saw something before. And if you have a record of what you've seen later, that shows growth. That is more important than the day you're born. I knew Impressionism was fantastic. You don't have, nobody can be that. So this is
Yeah.
one thing that I'm getting everyone to do is try and journal your thoughts. You will have a lot of thoughts, and that is part of the experience of art. You will have a much richer experience with art if you learn to journal. And just one thought once in a while is fine. A post-it is also fine. You were saying something, Shada?
No, I was just agreeing that whatever you were saying was making sense.
Okay. Cool. So next week, I want to take up William Morris. my soulmate. There is a William Morris cigarette company also. So it's not that William Morris. He is a 19th century textile designer, and he did a lot of stuff. So I will wax eloquent about him next week. And in the meantime, if you want to try recreating more paintings, and you could very well make them into cards if you want to continue to make gift cards, because we still have Christmas coming up. If you feel you want to give people gifts during that time, this is a very lovely, these make for very nice cards, these colors. So even if they, as a painting, they might be very daunting. A small detail as a gift card works very well. Okay. All right. So I shall catch you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.